there's so much fear that you end up picking up from being in either, those the traditional 12-step programs, because, you have in your mind that, if I take a psychedelic, I've then relapsed. Or if I take a psychedelic, I've lost all my clean time, all my sobriety. I may end up losing my sponsor because my sponsor doesn't want to sponsor me because they see that I've relapsed or I've, gone back to using. Whereas, when you're looking at psychedelics, you have an intentional use of a plant-based medicine for trauma release that then was the thing that underpinned why you were using something addictively.
Hi everyone, welcome to Psychedelic Conversations. Now today I have with me Richard Morton, who is incorporating psychedelics in his recovery. Thank you for being with us, Richard. So nice to meet you.
Oh, thank you, Susan. Thank you.
And you have a stand behind down there and been talking to people today. And
yeah, so my journey is I came into Alcoholics Anonymous / Narcotics Anonymous. And while that gave me huge freedom from active addiction of alcohol and drugs, it got to a point that I felt a little bit stuck and I wasn't able to then move further. And so I then found Psychedelics in Recovery, which allows the intentional use of psychedelics within a recovery program to sort of, get that the freedom from addiction.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that psychedelics are intervention in especially in recovery processes?
Absolutely. I think we have to use a huge amount of caution. I wouldn't recommend someone to come straight into psychedelics without possibly looking at abstinence first. However, sometimes people that just can't get that abstinence, the best course of intervention is a psychedelic experience to give them that break, the break of the cycle to be able to get the recovery.
Mm-hmm. And are you also, what's the biggest challenge for you to speak about, being an advocate, should we say, is that a right word, or at least,
I think the biggest thing for me is, I'm still connected to, my Narcotics Anonymous program, my Narcotics Anonymous friends, also people from AA, but I'm no longer part of that program. And I think one of the big challenges for me is knowing how effective psychedelics are, especially dealing with trauma and addiction. How do I then let people know that are part of that old system that I was in, that there is another way and there is ways to get freedom from active addiction other than the only way they see is just this one very staunch way. So I think that's a bit of a challenge. There's so much fear that you end up picking up from being in either, the traditional 12-step programs, because, you have in your mind that, if I take a psychedelic, I've then relapsed. Or if I take a psychedelic, I've lost all my clean time, all my sobriety. I may end up losing my sponsor because my sponsor doesn't want to sponsor me because they see that I've relapsed or I've, gone back to using. Whereas, when you're looking at psychedelics, you have an intentional use of a plant-based medicine for, trauma release that then was the thing that underpinned why you were using something addictively.
Yeah, so there's two parts here. So the reason for the addiction is a trauma.
Yep.
And the fellowship programs, they offer the connection, because connection is almost necessary for the healing.
Yep.
Trauma. So you have the structure of the connection and
Community.
the lineage, the community. Then you have over here psychedelics as an intervention tool.
Yep.
How the bridging the two, because like you said, there's always this fear about seeing the psychedelic use as a relapse or you lost your
Correct.
sobriety, right? So what's been done so far to bridge the two?
There isn't. Okay. So if you're looking at alcohol, AA or NA, once you use psychedelics, that's a relapse, and you reset your clean time. There is no way within either one of those programs to incorporate psychedelics and still be part of that community in the way you were before. What then happens is you have people sort of, whispering behind your back, oh, this one's relapsed, or this one's not clean, or this one's, not working a good program. So there isn't that bridge until sort of psychedelics in recovery, which is probably the youngest of the 12-step programs, came around 15 years ago, and that bridges a number of different programs alongside the intentional use of psychedelics. So the 12 steps in psychedelics in recovery are slightly different than that in some of the traditional 12-step recovery groups. And it allows you then to be able to incorporate, these amazing plant medicines into that rigid, or what was rigid, program. So that's where they've kind of taken the best of both and put them together.
That would be the bridge in my opinion, I think, yeah, right?
Absolutely.
So, and you said it's the youngest one of all of them? Quite recent?
It's quite recent. So it's been around for about 15 years.
Not so young.
So not so young, but, for the more established programs, it's...
Like AA been around since the long time now.
30s, I think. Yeah.
That's
and then the early 50s was NA. So it's been around for quite a short time.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So
it's still the teenager on the block.
Sure, yeah, and that could be the bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think anytime, I have a lot of people that I'm connected with who are incorporating psychedelics in their recovery.
Yep.
And every time, we have a conversation or they speak in any of my platforms, everyone's listening.
Okay, wow.
There is a big interest. People are receiving well. I know it's almost critical right now, especially in the recovery programs that are out there not successful. So there is this valuable STEP program or the community, then now you have the intervention tool. We definitely need to bring them together.
Yeah, we're at the Breaking Convention at the moment. Psychedelics in Recovery has had a presence here. So we've had, we'll have 3 meetings over the weekend. We've had 2 so far. We've also had a panel discussion. And as well as having a stand, which I'm sure you'll show pictures of.
Which is just down behind us, yeah.
And what we found is so many people coming in that came from other 12-step recovery backgrounds, and as they've moved, into the use of psychedelics in very, strict, they're using it in very intentional ways, but as they're doing that, they're having to pull away from their community, pull away from those traditional recovery groups. And we've had so many people burst into tears, at the fact that we now have a meeting where it actually bridges all the community of recovery, but also allows the intentional use of psychedelics sort of coming together in the format using the 12 steps that they're familiar with. So it's been, I think, hugely healing for a number of people, because they see that they don't have to lose out on their sobriety. They don't have to lose out on their community. There is another way of doing this. I still thank the traditional 12-step programs for what they gave me. They gave me the freedom from addiction. I just wanted to go further. I wanted the freedom from trauma. I wanted to, break some of those generational things that have been in my family line. And the only way I was able to do that was going the psychedelic route. And I don't look at just psychedelics in recovery, just like I didn't look at just, those traditional programs. I look at, I work the program of psychedelics in recovery. I work alongside an amazing psychedelic therapist, which I'm so blessed to have. I also incorporate the plant medicine, so I do microdosing, and then I will use an intentional use of psychedelics in a macro way, either within a group ceremony, or most recently, I was struggling with a lot of grief. And I ended up doing a very large dose of 13 grams that I did alongside a specific trip sitter / shaman that actually came to my home, and we did the entire ceremony in my home. And for me, that was probably the largest amount of freedom that I've ever experienced, was doing it that way. My background, as I shared a bit before with you, is I was conceived in a sort of bit of a violent way. My mother was 15. My birth mother was 15. Her parents then didn't want anyone to know and wanted to hide everything in the community. And it's a very conservative Dutch community. And so she was sent off to Zimbabwe. She gave birth to me. I was then put in an incubator and, then adopted. So, my conception was traumatic. My birth was traumatic. My introduction to the world was traumatic. And then the mother that should have taken care of me gave me up. So you have that trauma that goes along with that. And then trying to bond with a new mother, or a new set of parents. And that, I think, has been probably at some level so deep inside my DNA that as I was working, traditional 12-step program, I was only able to go so far, because as I'm working on step 4 and the trauma that was coming up, I was having breakdowns. And I was finding it such a traumatic experience that when I finally made that decision to do psychedelics and the freedom I got, so, the medicine helped to reframe my entire upbringing. So rather than, me going, oh, there was all this trauma around my birth and all the rest of it, what I was shown through higher power, through the mushrooms, was, look at where I placed you. You might have had a traumatic birth. You might have had a traumatic upbringing. You might have, lived in 21 houses in 7 countries on 3 continents by the time you're 21, which is hugely turbulent. But look at the family I placed you in. Your parents have been married now for 54 years. Every single one of your aunts and uncles has been married for a minimum of 50 years. Your grandparents were married for, celebrated, I think, 60 years of marriage, or 63 years of marriage. So I was placed within that very strong, very stable family unit. And I was able to see that as a result of using the plant medicine. And that, when I started to then look at the steps and look at the trauma, and then starting to confront some of the things that happened to me, all of a sudden, I have this amazing relationship with my parents. The trauma that I thought I had is just, a lot of it's just released. And that's why it is, for me, it's so difficult looking at traditional recovery and knowing that, it's not a shortcut, because I had to look at that stuff. Yeah. But using the plant medicine alongside traditional recovery then meant that I was able to go so much further, so much faster.
It's almost like dismantling the psychological defenses in a way that helps you see things with a new perspective. Yep. Right? It's not that we take it and then the medicine does everything for us. It's just...
No, because you have to work alongside it.
Work through it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And some of that stuff was painful to work through. Yeah. Because I have to look at it and go, but this is what I believe. But this is what the mushroom shows me is truth. And you have that dissonance of fighting against each other until you actually realize, actually, this is the truth. This is for my betterment. This might be painful to look at, but let me look at it. And, while I was using intravenous, crystal meth alongside a whole bunch of other concoctions of drugs, I'd always finish using and want to use more. There was no way of stopping. Whereas when I look at, plant medicine, I go into a ceremony with reverence, and I go in with this holy peace and anxiety and everything at once. And then I take that medicine, I go through my 6 to 8 hour, working through the various issues until you get to the other side. But when you get out to that other side and you've looked at this issue and that and the next, the last thing you want to do is pick up mushrooms and do it again, And I think that's the huge distinction between, crystal meth, cocaine, GHB, GBL, some of the other things I've done.
And then
versus, I go in for a healing ceremony that I might only do every 3 to 6 months, but there's the reverence that goes in with that.
Yeah, this is so beautiful, and this is why we have these conversations. This is what we need to spread. This is the message we need to talk and spread and get behind. Thank you so much, Richard.
Absolute pleasure.
This has been great. So yes, what can you tell us? How can our listeners find information?
Okay. So I would look at, just go into the website, Psychedelics in Recovery. And there's meetings there. So there's a meetings tab that'll give you tons of information there. The meetings are done in Pacific time, so you'll have to do the conversion to figure out what time zone you work in.
Yeah.
There's also lots and lots and lots of great articles, as well as some pretty incredible resources about recovery and psychedelics and how those two merge.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure.
So hope to follow your journey, and maybe in the future we can connect again for a longer deep dive.
Absolutely.
If that's okay.
Susan, good to see you. Thank you so much.
And enjoy the rest of your conference.
Okay.
Thank you everybody for joining us. Hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. As always, comment below, share your experience, get in touch. You can connect with Richard, myself, and I see you on the next one. Bye for now.